Yo, what's going on today, guys? Back here for an updated EX tier list. I think the last one was like 2 weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. Basically, we're at a point in the meta where it's kind of solved. Some new decks are appearing here and there, but for the most part, we know which EXs are the most broken. So we have S++, which is the best card in the game. I mean, if you guys are following the game and seeing stuff, we already know who's going to be in this. It's Arceus, the literal god Pokemon. S+, which is close to Arceus, but just, it's not Arceus. Arceus is literally that broken that has to have its own tier, in my opinion. And then we have S, which is just like top tier, like, the best of the best. Very strong, but they're just not that broken this level. Or, I mean, some of them are pretty broken, but Arceus is so broken, it makes them not look broken. We have A, which is high tier, which is good cards into the meta. B+, which is good, but has some weaknesses. Then we have actual B, which is alright. Basically, the same thing as B+, but they just have more weaknesses. Or they're just not as good into the meta. So then we have C, which is low tier, which are Pokemon that have like a lot of weaknesses. So for example, like either consistency, maybe it's a stage 2. Like it can do alright if it's fully set up, but sometimes it takes a lot to get fully set up, so where your opponent can just beat you before that like actually happens. Or they're just not as good, but they can do like decent in like certain situations, and if you get like a pretty lucky bracket path, like if you don't get like a too bad of matchups or something like that. Then we have use for fun. Don't kill me if your favorite card is in this, because mine is too. But yeah, it's just cards that are really not good in the meta. Like they're complete trash. Like yeah, you might see some doing like good in Swiss rounds, get a couple wins, but they usually will not make it to those top cuts in like these like actual big tournaments. Slash like even like the 200 like 160 plus player ones. Usually these cards are not making top cut. They can, I will preface that they can make it, but the chance is very, very low. Then we just have terribly designed, which are cards that I don't think will ever be meta relevant, because the way that they were made are just so bad that the cards are just complete garbage. I don't know what else to say. So I actually recorded like an updated one on Friday, which is actually scheduled for tomorrow, but I actually had to unschedule it because there's like a lot of changes I wanted to make. Plus, I feel like some of the stuff was wrong. So let me just, usually I just go in order, but I want to put Arceus at the top. So the thing about Arceus is it's literally the best card in the game. Yes, Rampardos does counter it. That's the only reason Rampardos is meta. Because if Arceus wasn't here to gatekeep so many decks, because Rampardos was good last season, don't get me wrong. Top 15 deck, maybe top 10. I mean, it won in Arceus last season. And it's good. It's a good card. It's a good deck. But the reason that Rampardos is in the second spot is literally because Arceus gatekeeps so many other decks from being meta relevant. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. Arceus is so broken. 130 damage, 140 of Geo. Now they're starting to play double Geo, double Rocky Helmet. So just additional, they have access to Dialga, which is possibly the best ramp up in the game, if not second. It's either that or Manaphy. And they also have access to Mew because they're using Dialga. So Mew is very good in certain matchups. Like, not only that, but there's literally like 12 cards designed to be played of Arceus. And I don't know how many exactly, but let's just say 8 out of 10, for example, are good. The only bad ones are like Raichu and Magnezone. And then we have a Abomasnow, which isn't bad, but it's not like the best of the best, but it has like Heatran, Crobat. And the funny thing is, it has all those good cards, but it's not even played with them. It's just, dude, this card is just broken. Like 140 HP, 2 retreat cost. Like, I think they should have gave it like 3 or like 4 retreat costs or something, dude, to try to balance it out. Not only is it one of the best attackers in the game, and it has access to Dialga because it is colorless, so it can get ramped up very easily. It can't even be affected by stuff like Confusion, which shuts out stuff like Miscellaneous, and just like even on like Weezing. Like Weezing was alright. Like there was that Weezing Darkrai deck. Wasn't the best version of Darkrai, but it's a thing. You can't even really like play like any like status condition decks really because of Arceus being in the meta. Because 80% of the time you play a tournament, you play against Arceus. This meta sucks. Okay, so now I'm just gonna do an order. So we have Venusaur. Unfortunately, Venusaur is super bad. So the whole point of Venusaur basically is you want to live as long as possible with the 190 HP, healing 30, using Erika's. So it's a stage 2, 4 energy. That's already a really huge commitment. So you're kind of forced to play either like Leafeon or Executor, or cards just like Stall Fit. And back when Venusaur was alright, the Venusaur could usually live 3 turns, occasionally 4 depending on what deck you were playing against. Arceus does so much damage combined with the Rocky Helmet that even with like a Giant Cape Erica, sometimes it does not matter, you still get mopped by Arceus. Plus you also have to have those cards in your hand. And Venusaur decks, if you're playing like another EX like either Leafeon or Executor with it, that's already 10 cards if you are playing, you know, 2 of all the packages, where you don't have a lot of room, so you can't even like play like potions a lot of the times in these Venusaur decks, because you'd rather have something like Pokemon Communication and like Cyrus. So yeah, the whole point of Venusaur is being able to live multiple turns, which doesn't really happen that much because Arceus. Arceus really just 2-shots it a lot of the time, and Venusaur does so low damage, they could usually just like swap out into like another Arceus or like maybe like a Mirror, for example, because it usually can set up multiple things with Dialga before like Venusaur even comes online. So we have Executor EX. Used to be like an S tier card when a lot of decks were playing evolutions, because you know, going first and then evolving Executor could like one-shot a lot of these basics. Nowadays or not basics, but these like stage 1, oh yeah, these like basic Pokemon that would evolve. But a lot of people are just playing basic EXs now, which have like more health, so Executor can't land like that lucky heads and one-shot stuff. 50 HP on Execute used to be bad because Skarmory was really meta relevant. I mean, we have like Carnivore now, so, but it's not like a huge represented deck, so like a slight buff for Executor because you don't get like one-shot a lot of the times, like before you can evolve. But the thing about this is that Executor also got nerfed. It's bad against the water decks now, because if you land a Tails, they can just irradiate the damage away, which used to be pretty decent actually against the water decks, but now because of that factor, you basically have to get lucky and land heads. The reason I'm not having it a B+ is because the factor of going first and then landing like 2 heads back to back can usually like one-shot a lot of things if they don't have potions. So it still has that potential. It's just not as good anymore. Plus, there's not really a good deck to play it. I mean, Executor Celebi is still nice, but Celebi is also a card that is kind of bad in this meta. Also, another thing about Executor EX is the best thing it used to have was being super tanky and living like 2 to 3 turns. Arceus just 2-shots it. So next up we have Celebi, which is an A card. I used to put this in S all the time. I was Celebi's biggest hater. In this current meta, is just not him. Basically the problem with Celebi is the potential of Celebi is super huge. You know, 5+ coin flips doing 50 damage. You know, you could basically one-shot a lot of things in the game if you can't get it set up high enough. The problem is 130 HP, guaranteed to get one-shot by Arceus. So you kind of like force around giant capes in every single deck of Celebi. But the problem with that is that even with the giant cape, Celebi gets one-shot by stuff like Palkia. And like realistically, you don't run blue in these decks. Blue isn't really not that good, because these other like support cards are so broken. So there's just so many things that threaten Celebi, which forces you to use giant cape, and I feel like some of the Celebi decks wouldn't want to use it. Not only that, but like Executor EX and like Leafeon, its partner, aren't the best cards either in the meta. So next up we have Yanmega EX, which is literally just a worse Arceus. Still not a bad card, so I'm going to put it in mid tier. But basically Arceus does 130 damage, Yanmega does 120. Also, Yanmega does require you to constantly put the energy back on it, so you can never ramp something else up in the back, or set something else up in the back, same thing. Also for the stage 1, Yanma is pretty bad, being a 50 HP, you know, basic, so you can get one shot sometimes if you do start with it in the active spot. So yeah, it's not bad, just, you know, not as good as Arceus. Honestly, it's still decent. 120 damage is still a really good threshold, so it's not complete garbage. Still does see use if people just don't decide to play Arceus. Yeah, and I guess it does have access to Erica, which is one benefit, and Irida because it is colorless, so you could play like Water Energy Leafeon or something. So yeah, it's whatever. So then we have Leafeon EX, which is very good, but so the thing about Leafeon is that 140 HP is a very big downside, because Geo Arceus does one-shot it, which means you force it around Giant Cape, which I really do think Rocky Helmet Leafeon is way better. Ramps up all these grass types like Celebi EX very fast and is very good in that. But the 70 like damage, like, it's consistent, unlike Executor, which is a coin flip. The thing about Executor is you have high peaks, where Leafeon you do a constant, like sometimes like 80 is enough to one-shot something on the first couple of turns, like back to back. But like 140, like for example, like Arceus has 140 HP. You think, yeah, 70, you know, attack Arceus twice. Thing is, they usually have a giant cape or a shaman or like potions. So a lot of the times you have to like 3 hit or like 4 hit something with Leafeon to be able to knock it out. and that's just the reason it can't struggle. It can't get fast knockouts. And like I said, Celebi isn't the best in the meta, which is, you know, its best partner. So we have Charizard. So Charizard, very still strong. I mean, it does one-shot stuff. The problem with Charizard is it is a stage 2, and you do kind of like rely on Moltres flips a lot to set it up. So I still do think Charizard Moltres always has the potential. Maybe they could go in the B+, I'm gonna be real. But I feel like the potential of having a good run of Charizard is always something that can happen. Actually, the meta is super dominated by water decks and basics. You know what? Actually, I think Charizard and Moltres for the first time, I'm not going to put them in A or higher. Really good into double EX decks if you can get Charizard set up fast. You know, it does one-shot everything still. Problem is, if you go against these decks like Rampardo, sometimes they can't actually knock your Charizard out in the time it's going to take you to knock out those 3 basics, because the only attacker really is Charizard. Like, sometimes you can't play Dawn and tackle Moltres, but Moltres only does 70 damage, which doesn't one-shot anything in these like basic decks, like such as like Rampardos, for example. The weakest attackers are Sudowoodo and Marshadow, which have 80 HP, and you usually don't run Geodes and Charizard, so I feel like it can struggle against those 3 basic decks, where like it does still shine against the 2 EX decks, but the problem is that 1, water types are broken, so that's one bad thing for Charizard, even though Charizard does have a lot of HP. And the fact that it has to knock out like sometimes like 3 things. Plus, a lot of the times Arceus ramps up faster and can just knock you out before you can get Charizard set up if you do get unlucky with either coin flips with Moltres, or just actually drawing the evolution pieces. Next up, we have Arcanine. Arcanine was good for the slight period when Pikachu was meta, and when it was played with Charizard, and you know, it was pretty good. Nowadays, gets one shot by Arceus, it damages itself, so it, if you attack and you swap out, you can always get Cyrus back in. 120 damage, like, yeah, it's alright, but at least like something like Yanmega has ramp up potential with either Manaphy or like Dialga, or it can be played with grass decks. The thing is, Arcanine, the only ramp up is Moltres. Moltres isn't the best card, I won't lie. I think Moltres is kind of carried by Charizard. Like, I don't think Moltres would be as good if Charizard didn't exist. That's why I kind of like partnered them together. For Arcanine and Moltres, just doesn't have enough damage and the health to basically compete in this meta. Yeah, next up we have Infernape. So Infernape is very strong, 170 HP, so it's pretty tanky, can actually live a hit from Arceus / Dialga and stuff. 140 damage, and it is fire, so actually can one-shot Dialga, because Dialga is weak to fire, only has 150 HP, so it would take 160 damage. And Infernape can't play a Geo to guarantee one-shotting if they have the giant cape. Also does one-shot Arceus if they don't have a cape, which is a good thing. Problem with Infernape is that it's a stage 2. Its only problem. Its new partner is played Heatran, which is way better than the Moltres build that was played back in Space Time. Heatran just a better partner. 2 energy, 40 to 80 damage. And yeah, like I said, like Infernape is good. The only thing is it's a stage 2. So next up we have Blastoise. I thought Blastoise was for fun. It's actually kind of funny because like Blastoise and Venusaur kind of like changed. I thought Venusaur like had potential, but basically Blastoise 160 damage, does one-shot Arceus with giant cape. I feel like that's the main reason it's relevant. Plus, can one-shot Palkia. Can't one-shot Dialga if they have a cape, but most of the time Dialga probably should have damage on it, hopefully, first. Anyways, plus, you know, if Mew does copy you, Mew can't do 160 damage to you, so that is like the one benefit. You know, Manaphy, water type is just broken, Manaphy, Irida, and stuff. It is playing with like 2 Manaphys, 2 Origin Palkias, so one has to go through 2 basics before they get to Blastoise, so hopefully you have Blastoise set up before then. Yeah, I mean, it's not good. I mean, it's not bad. It's not like complete garbage, but it's alright, you know. It's alright. Next up we have Storm EX, which is being paired with a Palkia. Basically, there's so many Palkia decks, and Storm EX is just one of them. 2 energy, 90 damage, very aggressive. No retreat cost, which is cool. Irida, Misty, water types are just broken. There's not really much to say. It's just 2 energy, 90 damage. You just use it to attack, and then you set a Palkia in the back while it's attacking. Next up, we have Articuno. 18 card Articuno is the deck. Once again, Irida, Misty, water types just being super good. Yeah, Articuno is just very strong, you know, constant 80 damage, 10 damage to the bench. Blizzard does give you access to Cyrus. So 2 Cyruses and 2 Sabrinas, you can basically use that to disrupt your opponent and basically control the game. It's just a very good control deck. And, you know, if a deck is being played over 18 card trainers and just 2 basic Pokemon, you can tell the card's going to be very good. Also, I've never played this deck, but according to my homie who plays it, it has a very good matchup in the Rampardos. The Arceus matchup is obviously not as good because Arceus doesn't have a losing matchup. That's not Rampardos. and the mirror match, but that's just one thing to note. So next up we have Lapras EX, which is a promo pack card. 3 energy for 80 damage, literally just a worse Articuno. It has 30 true cost, 140 damage, gets 2-shot half the time, so healing from its attack doesn't do anything. It's just simply a fundamentally bad design card. Maybe if it had more HP or something to justify the healing on it, it just doesn't do anything. Like, you heal 20 damage. Even back in the day, like when it came out, like Genetic Apex, Pikachu still 2-shot this thing for like 180 damage. And like, yeah, you have access to like Irida now, but at the same time, like 40 plus like what the 60, 70 just doesn't, it's not a lot. It's just, so you have 140 HP, you go 1-shot by Arceus anyways, half the time. So you run Giant Cape, take 130 damage, or you heal back up to like 90, 80. I'm not doing the exact math, but like, it's just very bad. Like, it's just a very bad design card. I think all the promo pack cards are just designed to be pretty bad. So we have Gyarados. As the time of recording this, it is definitely moved up to A. I had it in B+, but there's a new version of Gyarados being played with Manaphy and Origin Palkia. Basically, like almost every water deck that has almost like every water deck that kind of be played with like that combination. Or there's like another one with like a Manaphy, Regice, Manaphy, and or there's also like another one with like 2 Druddigons and like a Kangaskhan instead of like your Ninja. Also, the Greninja one is still fine. 140 damage, 1-shot Arceus. The ability on the thing doesn't really do anything a lot of the times, like, because like half the time like Arceus and them are already like fully set up out Dialga, so like risking an energy from your opponent can occasionally matter, most of the time not. But the thing is, like, the 140 damage plus you're only a stage 1, so that's better than nothing. Plus you have 180 HP, so and like access to Irida now, so you can live like sometimes like 2 hits, depending on like what decks you are playing against. Usually you still get 2-shot by Arceus, but I guess the other decks you can live like twice and get like 3 Gyarados attacks off. Next up we have Palkia, which I think is like almost like potentially like the second best EX in the game. I'm gonna put it as plus. I think 1 Manaphy is just really good. 150 damage, doing 20 damage to the bench of the 10 is just better than Articuno. So a lot of the times like they have to have like a potion or 2 shamans to be able to like negate Cyrus from being online. Even the 30 damage from Slash is nice, being able to 2-3 shot some basic Pokemon such as like Sudowoodo in these fighting decks. And just Irida, Misty, Manaphy, you know, the traditional things I've been talking about for water types. It's just very strong. Plus, you know, it's a basic water type, so sometimes you can't get those BS Misty flips on turn 1, which honestly, if you do it against the Dialga Arceus player, I'm very happy for you, because screw that card. Next up, we have Glaceon EX, which is a very solid B+ card. I mean, I just want to turn off it. Very good in the Rampardos matchup if you can get it set up early. The thing about Glaceon is pretty balanced. You know, it basically does 100 damage a turn, possibly 110 if it still is alive on your opponent's turn. And 3 energy, stage 1, 140 HP, so it does get one. Like anything with like 140 HP, I will mention that Arceus can one-shot it, because it is very important, as literally Arceus is the most dominant deck right now in the meta. So Giant Cape you need in that matchup. Yes, you know, it's another water type, so Irida, Misty can potentially win you games, or just, you know, Irida and Misty are just Esto cards. So Pikachu is just not it in the meta. Basically, you know, Rampardos is the second best deck. Sudowoodo alone shits on this deck, let alone Lucario and Marshadow. Don't even need Rampardos to be able to beat Pikachu. Basically, the fighting decks are like gatekeeping Pikachu even harder than the other cards that gatekept it in space time. Next up we have Zapdos, which isn't super bad. No, honestly, bro, I kind of had copium for Zapdos. I think if you're playing electric decks, Zapdos can be good. Thing is, electric decks are not that good right now, and it has only 130 HP. Then we have Pachirisu. Pachirisu is low tier, better than Pikachu for sure, because you don't have to have like the 3 bench Pokemon. You don't have to have a tool card, but I mean, you usually run like 4 or maybe 5 of them, depending on like what variants you are playing. Once again, unlike Pikachu, it does get shit on by these fighting decks, so it's not as good as it was in space time when fighting decks weren't like super meta. But you know, you can get it online early. You can sometimes win games very fast. It's not good, don't get me wrong, but if you get very lucky and your opponent can't break, you can sweep them. Next up we have Gengar EX. So Gengar EX is lock shot your opponent's support cards. Not that good, because half the time Arceus is set up before you can even get this thing online / set up, so they just 2-shot you, guaranteed. Psychic type, so if you play against a Dark Red deck, you're probably cooked. 100 damage only. It's just not good. The ability on Gengar, broken. Actual Gengar, every other thing, the stats, like the HP is pretty solid at 170, but the attack damage is so bad that like once you get Gengar online, like you don't do anything with Gengar. Next up we have Mewtwo, which I want to put low tier, dude, because I feel like, nah, it's garbage. Basically you 2 reliant on Gardevoir. Gardevoir is a stage 2. Yeah, you have Mythical Slab and Pokemon Communication. At the same time, Darkrai is still very meta relevant. Not only that, but we also have Crobat in the meta. And Psychic type just get cooked by Dark types, unfortunately. Plus, it, like I said, takes too long to ramp up, where like something like Dialga or Arceus doesn't take that long. And the reason I mentioned Dialga or Arceus for almost every EX card is because that deck is literally played 90% of the time. Not obviously it's not 90% of the time, but if you look at it's basically that, and Rampardos is 90% of the time, like 90% of the decks in the tourney. So next up we have Mew. Mew is very strong because of Arceus and Dialga. So Dialga can ramp it up very fast, so it's another option besides Arceus. And in the mirror match, it's essentially a third Arceus, or it's very good against Palkia, Charizard if you actually do play against it. And it does have its niches. You can ramp up a lot of energy with Dialga if you do place against a Celebi, so you can copy Celebi's attack and do some coin flips. But the main reason it is strong is because Palkia and Arceus copying those attacks are just super strong. Plus it's just like another, it's like I said, it's a third Arceus basically, or in a third card that Dialga can ramp up in that deck. We have Miscellaneous, so 2 energy, stage 1 for 70 damage, and you can fuse. And fuse doesn't go away unless you retreat. I actually think Miscellaneous would be a low tier card, but because Arceus can't get confused, I do think it's just, I think it's kind of like very bad in the meta. Next up we have Cresselia, which is extremely bad. Every time you put an energy on it, you heal. I don't know why you wanted to put more than 3 energy anyway, so you kind of like force to do Cresselia only. Kind of forces you to want to play it with Gardevoir. But Gardevoir, like I said, same problem with Mewtwo. And if you're gonna be playing like a basic with Gardevoir, just play Mewtwo. This card is supposed to be the opposite of Darkrai, where Darkrai is an S tier card. Cresselia is not. Next up we have Machamp EX. So Machamp is just a worse Rampardos. Theoretically can one-shot Arceus because Arceus is weak to fighting and Machamp does 120, so plus 20 would be 140. Also, they have access to Lucario, so even if a giant cape, you could theoretically one-shot it. Thing is, it's a stage 2, which, you know, same as Rampardos, but 3 energy is a commitment when you already have stuff like Lucario. So 2 energy on Lucario and then 3 energy on Machamp can be too hard sometimes. That's not even including if you have like stuff like Marshadow or Sudowoodo in the deck. Also, it's an EX, so let's say you do go into Machamp early, you get very lucky and you draw everything and you have 3 energy on it, it gets knocked out. All they have to do is knock out one more thing. And Marshadow, Lucario, those cards do not have a lot of HP and are very easily to get knocked out. Marowak is a card that I've always believed in to be low tier at minimum. I'm not saying it's any higher, but theoretically Marowak can do 160 damage on the second turn if you do go second. It has the potential, just extremely inconsistent. Plus, there's just better fighting types that are more consistent that you can run. But if more people were playing Marowak, I do think Marowak could have results. Next up we have Aerodactyl. So Aerodactyl is alright if there is a heavy evolution format. Almost all of the meta decks are basics. The only real evolution deck is Rampardos, which all the evolutions are usually on the bench, with Sudowoodo and Marshadow being the active spot, or like Hitmonlee. So Aerodactyl, you negate them from evolving. It's a worse fossil than Rampardos because it only does 80 damage and 140 HP. And it cannot one-shot Arceus. And some of the best decks are basically almost like all basics. So we have Arceus, Palkia, Mew, Celebi, and then even like Dialga, which we haven't got to, and Darkrai. So the effect of Aerodactyl is very useless in this meta. Next up we have Gallade, which is very strong into this meta. I'm going to put it at A tier. So very good against the Dialga and Arceus matchup because they usually have a lot of energy. It's a stage 2, which is the, you know, biggest downside of Gallade, but 170 HP and only 2 energy. So unlike most stage 2s that need a lot of energy, such as like Venusaur and Blastoise, if you can get all the evolution pieces, you can start doing high damage right away. Not only that, but fighting types are really good into the meta. Being able to access, usually you play Hitmonlee, which is very good into the Rampardos matchup. So Hitmonlee for Rampardos and then Gallade for Arceus, you know, it's just very decent into the top 2 decks. Doesn't auto win against them, but has a very strong matchup as long as you don't brick. So next up we have Garchomp EX, which is a very bad Pokemon. I think the regular Garchomp is better because you have access to Cynthia, 150 damage, plus the ability to cycle through the deck. The thing that carries Garchomp, because if you think about it, Garchomp very similar to Machamp, 3 energy, 120, Garchomp only does 100, but it has the linear attack, 50 damage to the bench Pokemon that carries it just a little bit better because you could theoretically go in the Garchomp EX for 1 energy and start doing damage for like a Machamp, you need 3 on it. So that small aspect is what kind of like separates them. Plus it's a 1 retreat cost where Machamp is 3. So if you actually want to like evolve into it and then swap out, you can do that. Next up we have Weavile, which is a solid B mid-tier card. Actually maybe it's B+. Probably the most aggressive deck. I just covered this on my channel too. Very good with Darkrai. Grass types are not in the meta right now, for the most part. I think Carnivine is starting to creep up there a little bit of like the top 12-ish, top 10 range. But for the most part, if you can get like Dawn and Darkrai and Weavile early, you can get a lot of quick knockouts before your opponent can ramp up. At the same time, 140 HP still. I mean, Arceus just cooks everything. Everything but Arceus, I feel like the deck is like pretty decent into, besides like stall decks that have Druddigon. Next up we have Darkrai, which is still a very top tier card. We have Dark Zone that's still just occasionally good. We have Arceus, Darkrai Weavile. You know, the ability to do 20 damage just for 1 energy to the active opponent with being able to attack with something else. Just a very strong ability in the game. The downside of Darkrai possibly could also be an A tier card. Maybe I'm putting this too highly. Actually, I'm going to put an A because of the meta plus 140 HP. So next up we have Dialga. Only as good as a card that can ramp up. It was a top 10 card last time, like an A, I would say an A tier last patch, because the only good ramp up it really had was Yon Mega. But Arceus broken. I think we already know. You know, ramp up, plus you also could potentially also attack for heavy impact 100 occasionally. So you ramp up and then you do 100 damage before it gets fainted. Extremely powerful. Probopass EX, 90 damage for 3 energy. You would probably be playing it with Dialga, so just play Arceus instead, plus the basic before you evolve in the Probopass. Nosepass is extremely garbage. All 3 variants are pretty bad, and you really don't get any utility out of them. Plus, it's supposed to be very tanky with Adaman, I think is what they wanted you to play with it. But even with attacking and using Adaman, you still get 2-shot half the time. So it's another card like Venusaur where it's supposed to stay alive for multiple turns, but because of Arceus, it just does not. Or even Rampardos, for example, can destroy this card. So we have Wigglytuff, 3 energy, stage 1 for sleep. Sleep is a gimmick. Plus Arceus can't be slept, very similar to Miscellaneous. Also, it's just a worse Miscellaneous because Miscellaneous is 2, where Wigglytuff is 3. Yeah, it's colorless, so you have the option to play it in any deck. But also 2 retreat cost, 140 HP. And Sleep is probably worse than Confusion, because Sleep can go away, where Confusion stays. Pidgeot EX, honestly, I want to put it in for fun. I think Pidgeot EX like is slightly alright. You know, it is colorless, can be played with anything. 170 HP. Basically the counter to Arceus, although it's not really a counter to Arceus because Arceus ramps up faster and basically still beats Pidgeot 90% of the time. 99% of the time it does play against it, as you don't have really a good ramp up card for Pidgeot. Like the closest one would probably be Dialga, but Pidgeot's a stage 2, Arceus is a stage 1. They're still going to ramp up faster. Plus, you also have to get lucky and draw the cards. Plus, get the things off Pokemon Communication. So, not terrible. Not good. It's not unusable like these 3. I think Probopass could potentially be... No, Probopass is bad. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to act like it's not. Then we have Licky Licky. Very similar situation to Probopass. The basic is so bad before you evolve Lickitung. You don't get any utility out of it. Also, it has like a high retreat cost, I'm pretty sure. Plus, Licky Licky only does 100 damage. Potentially more, but once again, you used to play it with Dialga, played Dialga Arceus. Anyways, that's the updated one. Just wanted to do this. Peace out. Have a lovely day. Please someone save us. This meta is garbage.